Vinland Saga was disappointing. Whoa, easy, put the pitchforks down. Let me explain. I actually really enjoyed watching through Vinland Saga, but while the show does so many things well, it fails in a few key areas, and I found this to be deeply unsatisfying. Also, this video is only discussing the anime of Season 1, so I'm not referencing the manga or Season 2. I haven't gone through those yet, so this might not apply to them. Oh, and here's your spoiler warning for Season 1. We will be going over the show's key moments, so if you haven't seen it yet, please go watch it. Okay, let's jump in. I think historical fiction is a hugely untapped genre for anime. I really enjoyed learning about the characters, battles, and locations, and then looking them up later to see how accurate the show was. I have to be honest, I wish this genre was more popular than it is. I definitely wish it was more popular than the isekai genre of anime, because I gotta be honest, that genre is kind of boo-boo. Also, the animation for Season 1 is another fantastic example of peak Wit Studio animation, so that was an absolute pleasure to watch. But if the show is so good and I enjoyed it so much, why do I think that it's disappointing? Well, I thought that the character development for these two characters, Thorfinn and Canute, was extremely underwhelming. After all, this show was lauded for its setting and characters, so I was quite surprised that I disliked this aspect of it so much. These two characters fail for different reasons, but before we get too far into it, let's break down the fundamental elements of character development. There are essentially two major aspects you need to consider when talking about character development. The first is whether the character is static or dynamic. A dynamic character is one that undergoes significant internal changes to their person as they move through the story. A static character remains the same as the story progresses and doesn't change internally. The second aspect is whether the character is flat or round. All that this indicates is the amount of depth that the character will have. A flat character is very one-dimensional. What you see is what you get. And a round character has more things to explore and discover as you learn more about them. They essentially have layers.
Layers!
Now, this isn't always the case, but a general rule is that main characters are typically dynamic and round, and side characters usually tend to be more static and flat. This is because it's easier to keep an audience's attention if the main character is going through significant changes and growing. This is really rewarding for audiences to be a part of, because we all love to see and experience this change. However, keep in mind that neither static, dynamic, round, or flat character design is inherently good or bad. There are fantastic characters of all types, and I think it will help if I show you what I mean. Let me give you guys an easy visual guide and give some examples to help you understand the differences. Okay, let's start with a grid that has an X and Y axis, which creates 4 quadrants. And the very middle of this intersection is our 0 point. Most of the time, you don't want your character to be here because this is usually really boring. Any space to the right of the 0 point will be a dynamic character, and any space to the left of the 0 point will be a static character. Any space below the 0 point will be a flat character, and any space above the 0 point will be a round character. So let's start off with some famous characters from animation and see where they land on this grid. How about Goku? I would argue that Goku is probably the flattest, most static anime character to ever exist, and he is still one of the most beloved characters ever. He never really changes throughout the course of the story, and the only things that he loves to do are train, eat, and fight strong enemies. That's really all there is to him, so he goes in the very bottom left of the grid. He is a static, flat character. But if we were to examine Prince Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender, we see the complete opposite of Goku. Zuko is originally an enemy, but has a redemption arc where he eventually joins forces with the Avatar. His motivations for what he wants runs deep, yet changes over time. He is a troubled youth obsessed with regaining his honor and pleasing his father, but those views change as he learns more about the world and more about himself. That means he goes into the right upper quadrant as a dynamic, round character. Now let's look at Captain Levi from Attack on Titan. He doesn't really change over the course of the story, so he is more static, but he is also more of a round character because of the information that is revealed about his past and his upbringing. He is the greatest fighter in the Scout Regiment, and it's always a treat to see him use his skills to get out of sticky situations. I would therefore place Levi in the upper left quadrant as a static, round character. The bottom right quadrant is probably the most rare type of character. It's usually pretty difficult to get flat characters to change over the course of a story, but I believe this is the category that both Thorfinn and Canute fall into. They each have one major event that changes the trajectory of their character type, but after that, they don't really change that much, so they are kind of a soft, dynamic character. Also, neither character has a ton of depth to them. What you see is basically what you get, and they are both young and are still trying to figure out their place in the world, so I would consider them more flat than round. But remember, none of these quadrants means that your characters and character development are good or bad. That is determined by your skill and the level of execution that you develop them with. And this is my main problem with Thorfinn and Canute. Let's start with Thorfinn. Early on in Season 1, he swears an oath of vengeance upon Askeladd, the man who murdered his father. And this makes for a great premise to the entire first season, but it's also the part of the story that I have the most issues with. Thorfinn's character archetype becomes a monomaniac. Let's define that. Mono is a prefix that means singular, solo, or one, and maniac isn't referring to a lunatic per se, but rather a fanatic or a person with an obsession. So think of it like a character who is completely obsessed with one specific thing. Thorfinn's entire existence is focused on getting revenge, and this premise is really interesting because Thorfinn is still a child, and Askeladd is an adult, so you're not really sure how it's going to play out. Remember, we categorized him as a dynamic character as well, except he's already gone through his change. He was a nice boy, and now he's a very angery boy. He doesn't really change that much throughout Season 1 after this. Also, because Thorfinn is a child, he doesn't have a lot of character depth to draw on, which makes him pretty flat. But does that mean that Thorfinn can't be developed as a character? No. There is a very simple way to develop the character of a monomaniac. You have to test their devotion to their mania. When Thorfinn is following Askeladd's men, it shows him trying to hunt and forage for food. He is unable to do so and is therefore starving. The men toss him a bone with some scraps of meat on it, and he just stares at it. This is one of the first real tests of his mania. If he accepts the food, he is receiving a helping hand from the men who murdered his father. But if he doesn't accept the food, he is risking starvation, which means he will fail at getting his revenge. I wanted to see more of these types of decisions throughout the show, and there were plenty of opportunities, but they were never quite fully realized. Let me show you a few, and I'll explain how I think they could have been better. In episode 6, Thorfinn is rescued by a mom and daughter. He then signals Askeladd's crew to begin an assault on the village and betrays the people who just rescued him. He has recollections of his own mom and sister, and while this scene is very moving, I think that it lacks real stakes. Remember, Thorfinn is trying to earn a duel with Askeladd in order to kill him, so he can avenge his father. What if Askeladd told him he would grant this duel if he infiltrated this village and sent his men a signal when it was safe for the assault? Now, when he encounters this kindness of strangers, the choice of sending them to their death isn't just between what's right and wrong, but between making or missing an opportunity to accomplish his revenge. In episode 8, Thorfinn is waiting by the boats while Askeladd's men are in town eating and enjoying themselves. A slave girl brings him food and they talk while he eats. While this scene is meant to illustrate that everyone is a slave to something, I felt that it was sort of flat. I think if you could introduce a choice for Thorfinn, it would make it more interesting. What if the slave girl begged him for his blanket and some food? Is Thorfinn willing to share his blanket and food with a slave girl in order to show kindness? Or would he eat all of the food and keep the blanket for himself in order to guarantee his maximum nutrition and health, so he is always ready to fight Askeladd at his best if the opportunity arises? The last example I would offer comes in both episodes 23 and 24. It's when Leif Erikson finally finds Thorfinn and tries to convince him to come home. He tells him that they should go back home and then they can set sail to find Vinland together, a place where wars and slaves no longer exist. Thorfinn finally accepts, but then leaves Erikson to go find Askeladd. What if instead of offering the hope of finding Vinland, a perfect world, he instead told Thorfinn that his mother and sister were in danger and were possibly going to die unless he came back and helped? The neat thing with this scenario is that it doesn't even have to be true. It could be a lie, but it still forces Thorfinn to choose between saving his remaining family or following through with his plans for revenge. Remember, these are just ideas on how to test Thorfinn's monomania to a greater extent. I understand that the show was showing us how jaded, calloused, and indifferent Thorfinn had become, but I wanted the story to dig a little deeper than just showing us the loss of Thorfinn's innocence. While that approach is moving, it's almost too simplistic, and I found it quite unfulfilling. The second character I had an issue with was Canute. This was by far the weakest character in the entire season in my opinion. When we are first introduced to Canute, he is a timid and reserved coward. However, his friend and mentor is killed by Askeladd's men, and this thoroughly disturbs Canute. He goes into a trance-like meditation for days, not saying anything to anyone. Basically, he sees his caretaker in a mental vision, and before he disappears forever into the afterlife, he gives him one last bit of advice.
Change the world. My final message. Goodbye.
That's all it takes, and now all of a sudden Canute understands the fundamental aspects of the universe, or something like that, and can halt even the most barbaric man with a single unwavering glance of his pouty little face. This whole aspect of Canute made me so angry. It's completely irrational, it doesn't really make sense, it doesn't fit into the setting or the story, and I just did not care for it. It didn't really feel like character development, it felt like character whiplash. Like all of a sudden this coward is now a turbo Chad and doesn't even need to learn how to wield a weapon because he knows the secrets of life and love and can pierce through men's hearts with only his eyes. I don't know, maybe you felt differently, but pretty much the entire character of Canute didn't make sense to me, and I was straight up not having a good time. I was seriously hoping that someone would please kill this fool and put me out of my misery, but then he became king, and yeah. In my opinion, Askeladd was far and away the best character of this entire show. I mean, this man was an absolute pleasure to watch. His scheming and outlook on life fit the show and setting so perfectly. It was a complete chef's kiss. I think this character development being so good is another reason why Thorfinn and Canute's character development felt so lame to me. But now it's your turn. Do you guys agree or disagree with me? I know pretty much everyone who watches Vinland Saga loves it, so I'm sure there are plenty of you who feel differently than I do. Feel free to tell me why I'm wrong in the comments, but all I ask is to please keep it civil. Also guys, I am super excited to announce that I just launched drewmalou.com and have even uploaded a few new merch designs like I Got That Dog in Me, Shinji in the Gym, and even the Wizard of Oz. If you guys want to take a look at my new website and hey, who knows, even pick up some merch for yourself, that's a fantastic way to support what I do on this channel, and I can't thank you enough. I'll try and upload new merch designs pretty consistently, so check back often, and of course, I'll let you know in future videos. Thanks to my patrons who made this video possible, especially Javi G and Elias Aksanov. You guys are absolute kings. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Drew Malou, and I'll see you storytellers in the next video.